Today we're going to focus on how to format our output, specifically when we are dealing with doubles that have lots of decimals, or if we are dealing with numeric data that represents money and we want to have commas, decimal points only showing 2 decimals, dollar signs, etc. So first we'll take a look at how to format this data, and then after that in class we will go ahead and modify our previous worksheet to only show 2 decimal points. Alright, so the class that we are going to use today is the DecimalFormat class. And what this does is this allows us to create a custom formatting for our output. We can control leading and trailing zeros, commas, etc. So first of all, we need to import this class, java.text.decimalFormat, and then we need to create a decimal format object. And when we create this object, we are going to pass a pattern string to the constructor. So let's real quick recap the anatomy of this line of code right here. So first of all, decimal format is the class. df is the variable name. When I say equals new, this is the keyword. This is necessary to create a new object. And when I create this new object, I am calling the constructor for the class. Now the constructor is always going to have the same name as the class that it is. And then depending upon the constructor, there may or may not be parameters that help us build this object. So we've seen numerous method calls where we have created these objects. We saw one for the random class, we saw one for the math class, and now we are seeing a statement for the decimal format class. And it always goes in the order of naming the class, then the variable name for the specific object. We are making a new object of this class name, calling the constructor, and then passing it a parameter. Now when we say that we're passing it a pattern string, this is going to give the instructions as to how we want this number to look in the output. Alright, so this string is going to be a series of pound signs and zeros. We use a pound sign to show the length that we want, and then we use a 0 to force a digit to show up. So this is necessary when sometimes we want to have that 0 show in front of the decimal point. So let's say, for example, the number was 40 cents. If we didn't have the leading 0, then we wouldn't have the 0 in front. The trailing zeros, that on the other hand would be any zeros that appear at the end. So this right here is my trailing 0. So the 4-0, the O at the end is my trailing 0, and the 0 in the beginning is my leading 0. And if I am forcing a digit to appear and there isn't a digit because its value is 0, then a 0 is produced. We can also put decimal point, the comma, even dollar signs where we want within this format string. So if you take a look, this right here is the given string that we are using as an example. So this is the given example, sorry, this is not a string right here. This is the given example double value. Alright, so if I were to format this number using this format string, I would notice that first of all 6 of the leading numbers are represented. There is a comma in between them, a decimal point, and only 2 digits appear. And so that's why we only see these 2 digits here. And we did round up. Now when we look at the next example, here we have the number in front and then we show 4 decimal places. So with this number in front, that's essentially saying that I don't care how many digits show up before the decimal point. I just want the number to show up before the decimal point. I do, however, care how many values show up after the decimal point. So these 4 zeros are going to force 4 digits to show up. Now on the next one, I also have the same format I saw in the beginning with the 3 numbers, comma, 3 numbers, and so on. Notice that these are using the the hashtag or the number sign. So because we have that, it will only show the value if it exists. So my given example double value has 6 digits before the decimal point. And so because it has 6 digits before the decimal point, it can only show 6 digits before the decimal point. And using the number sign like this is essentially saying, just give me the numbers that are there. If there happens to be a 7th digit, separate it with a comma. Now when we compare that to this bottom string right here, here I am saying that I want to see every single one of these digits represented, whether or not they exist. And so that's why I have this leading 0 along with that comma, even though it's not really appropriate for this problem. So after we have built our decimal format object, we can then use the format method to actually go ahead and format the output. Now it's important to recognize that the format method only returns a formatted string. So it's important to recognize that the format method returns a formatted string. It does not change the value of the number. So in this example, I created an integer called my_num, and it has this value. And if I want to format my_num to match the formatting I set up on the previous page, I would just pass my_num as a parameter. And then this decimal object is going to take this input and it returns a formatted string, which is then printed. If I look at the second example, notice that everything here is the same. The only difference is that instead of passing a variable to the method, I just passed a number literal. And a number literal is a literal number that I want to use, as opposed to a variable like I saw when I used my_num. Now in this code example, we can see a couple different things. So first of all, we can see here the creation statement. So this is where we are creating the scanner object. Here, these are just 2 variables that I'm going to use in my code. And then lastly, right here where I see df.format, that is where I am calling the format method to apply this rule to this variable, return the answer, and insert it into that print statement. And you can see the output as shown here. And we can see how starting with those hashtags in the beginning, what happens is it's going to give me as many digits as I have before the comma. And we also get that $sign in there. And then this next one, because it does have the 6 digits before the decimal point, it shows all 6 digits with the comma in between the 3. We can also see that because I specified after the decimal point with 0.00, that is going to go ahead and force 2 decimal digits to appear. All right, that's it. We will wrap up and deal with this a little bit more in class tomorrow.